thought, do we want to throw God's prophet overboard and make him even madder? But the storm continued, and they realized this was the only chance they had. So, they did it. They did it. They pitched me overboard, and there I went, kerplunk, into the drink. I was like, all right. I know what you're doing, God. I know what you're doing. You're trying to get me to go back to those Ninevites, and first I get off on the ship, right? I outdo you, step one, and then you send this storm, and then they throw me overboard. But God, I'm one step ahead of you, all right? I am not preaching those Ninevites. I mean, is this all you got, God? Seriously, is this all you got? Because I can keep on going for a long time if this is all you got. Gigantic fish came and swallowed me. And it got very, very dark. And I was thinking, smell.
Yeah, it's dark in here. Hot. Okay, I'm freaking out a little bit. What is that on my leg? Man, it stinks in here. What's that big dangly thing up there? Looks like a chandelier made out of meat. What's that thing on the back of your throat called again? Volley, vul, uvulal, epiglottis? Is that thing dripping on me? I think it's dripping on me. What's touching my leg? Man, it stinks in here.
So I was thinking, okay, so is this it, God? Seriously, is this my punishment for disobeying you? To be slowly digested by a giant fish? Well, that's just great. So there I was for 3 miserable days, all alone. Except for these little fish that were flipping and flopping all over the place, bugging me. Of course, I wasn't totally alone. I knew God was there with me in my misery. And it was about the 3rd day when my soul began to wake up. And it was about the 3rd day that I realized whether I wanted to die or not, I was going to die. I was in that sea, and those waves were crashing down on my head. The seaweed was wrapped around my body and pulling me down, and I was taking in seawater by the mouthful. I was going to die. And this fish, this giant fish, was not God's punishment. It was God's way of saving me. Why? I don't know. That fish, you see, was my salvation. That's why God sent the fish. Now, the next part of my story is interesting. Because, I've tossed my cookies before. Had some bad matzah. Couple too many kosher dogs. But I have never been anybody else's, upchuck. Which is a little disconcerting when you think about it. That Jonah, the prophet of God, was able to make a giant sea monster sick to its stomach. What am I? Am I a bad meal? But there I was in this living submarine when all of a sudden, gagooga, gagooga, reverse gears, ah! And I was out on the beach with the entire stomach contents of this fish covered in gook. But it wasn't just any beach that I was on. It was the beach directly across from Nineveh. You see, God called me again. He called me to this city of Nineveh. And I have to say, after 3 days inside that fish, I was more than a little humbled, more than a little ready to do what God asked me to do. You see, Nineveh wasn't just a little podunk town. No. Nineveh was the most magnificent city of my time. It was a city of 120,000 people. It took me 3 entire days just to walk through the city with God's message. That's how big it was. Its walls that surrounded it were 100 feet high and wide enough for 3 chariots to race across it. Its beauty was only outdone by the sin of its people. And so I did what God asked me to do. I walked through Nineveh, saying, 40 days and Nineveh will be destroyed. 40 days and God's going to light you up. 40 days and you're all going to be crispy critters. 40 days and you're going to be toast. And can you guess what happened? I mean, can you guess what happened? Can you guess what happened? Do you think they repented? Of course they did! Exactly like I predicted! Of course they did! Oh my goodness, they did exactly what I said! They all repented, every single one of them, from the beggar in the street to the king up on the throne. They all put on sackcloth and ashes and repented, and I was so mad! Even their animals repented. Weird. See dogs and cats going around with ashes on their heads. Little gerbils with burlap on. Every single one of them, 120,000 of them, and they all repented. And it made me so mad. I was like, God, how could you do this to me? Your servant, your prophet, who has been so obedient, except for that little trip to Tarshish and all, but I mean, I've been so obedient my entire life, and then you bring your mercy and your grace to these despicable, horrible, horrible people. How could you do this, God? Don't you know who they are? They're murderers and they're liars and they steal and they cheat and they're young punks and they're grumpy old men, and I just can't believe you do it. And God said, Jonah, is it right for you to be angry? Of course it is. You know what I did? I left. I went up to the east side of the city, and I went up and I waited. And I hoped. And I prayed that God would do what he said he was going to do, even though they repented.